I think we're living in an era where we don't really know what to trust, and we're quite disconnected from the real voices, the real people on the ground in a lot of situations who need to be heard.
Hello, I'm Emmy DeGrappa. Each week, we bring you stories asking our guests the question, why? We learn about their passion, why they do what they do, why should we care, and what can we learn? What better place to explore the human landscape than from the state known for its incredible landscapes, Wyoming? And what better organization than Wyoming Humanities? Serving our state for over 45 years, we share stories, ideas, and wisdom about the human experience. This is What's Your Why? Today, we are talking to Taylor Rees. She is a filmmaker and photojournalist. Taylor is driven by an insatiable curiosity to explore and tell the stories beneath the surface. Her work is in environmental and humanitarian issues. She brings new perspective and deepens public understandings to challenging topics. Welcome, Taylor.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. What was your desire and journey to become a filmmaker and photojournalist?
All through childhood and high school, always enjoyed photographing my friends. I was always the one running around with the camera. And as an undergraduate student, I actually studied science. And so I was working in Greenland doing climate change ecology work. At the time, it was the early 2000s, and climate science was really taking off. And so there were these locust swarms of scientists descending upon the Arctic, and I was one of them. And during my seasons there, I became really curious about, what kinds, if any, communication was happening between the Inuit who lived in these places and the science and kind of mainstream media coming out.
And is the Inuit the Native people that live there?
Yeah, the Inuit are the Indigenous to Greenland, and other parts of northern Canada. And so the second summer that I went back to do my science research, I brought a video camera and made my first film, which basically just asked all of the locals that lived in this area what it was like to have their home studied by outsiders, and really, became curious about that story that wasn't necessarily making it into the mainstream media, and that left me on a trajectory for the next 15 years.
To really study how those things were affecting the Native people, and what did they tell you? What did you learn?
I learned that, a lot of the people in the North in particular have been made poster children of the climate change narratives, the large narratives that circulate around our globe about what climate change is and how it's affecting people. And while those narratives are true, it's interesting how often we pigeonhole certain people to represent certain things. And, I met a woman in Baffin Island, which is very close to Greenland, who told me how from as early as she could remember, there was always a journalist coming up asking her to kind of pose as the child with her mother that could no longer hunt seal. And she said, while this is true and these are the realities of climate change, nobody's asking us about what it's like to be Inuit in modern times and how, centuries of colonization have affected their social structure and how little communication they have with scientists that are in their home, studying their home, how much they wish they could more participate in that and kind of help steer the scientific inquiry into things that would bring to the surface discoveries that actually might help them.
And how did that help you in your career and in that find your passion to discover these different perspectives?
Yeah, I was helped by those that I've met. I continue to be helped by those that I've met who are generous with their stories. I think it's difficult to be vulnerable, and the people that I've met as a filmmaker who have trusted me to kind of describe something in a way that's not normally documented has just instilled a greater passion that that's what I want to do. I work now as a photographer and filmmaker, and it's really easy to go to another place, either as close as your backyard or halfway around the world, and tell a story about another community. But it was ingrained in me just how important it is to make sure that you're telling that story through the voices of those who live there and not positing your own kind of perspective over top of it, or just, rushing through with an idea that you think you have about what's going on and not leaving space for a co-creation of that narrative with those whom are the subjects.
Tell me some of the different stories that you've told, and maybe some of your favorite ones that you've discovered along the way.
One of my favorites was an expedition that I did with National Geographic magazine. We traveled to the Himalayan region of Burma, Myanmar. So we walked 150 miles with a group of 30 porters and cooks of the Rawang region, and made it to the base camp of this mountain with the goal of sending 5 Western climbers up to summit a peak that had never been summited or had the height tested. It was still contested what the highest peak in Southeast Asia was. And so I was on this storytelling expedition to solve this geographic mystery about what the highest peak in Southeast Asia really was. But along the way, I found myself a lot more curious about what was happening to the villages that we were passing through. In that particular region, the trekking route that heads towards these mountains is slowly being turned into a tourist destination. Not everyone that lives there felt like they could be a part of that economy, but these things were, they're getting figured out, and a number of interesting things. Kind of just natural adventures have a lot of catastrophe, so there is a bit of that, and I just came away from that. Every time anyone goes to tell a story, there are, especially in a documentary style, there's an infinite number of possibilities of how to look at something and what to focus on and what you might highlight or what you might hide or downplay. And, the magazine article and the film that came out about that trip did keep its focus on the pursuit we went in with, which was the geographical mystery, the highest peak. But I came away with friendships and a greater understanding of the people's lives whom traveled with us and helped us, porter goods, and just a profound love for them. They're wonderful people.
What was their human story? What did you discover about those people that no one maybe has ever heard their perspective?
Yeah, well, I think being in those remote villages in countries with somewhat unstable governments like Myanmar, communication to their central government is really challenging. Only 1 or 2 people in every village has a radio. Nobody at the time has internet at all or cell phones. And so they can communicate via radio with each other, but they have no idea what kind of national or international regulations are coming down the pipeline that will affect them, from what's going to change how they can hunt, various conservation efforts, how the tourism of that region is potentially going to, come in and change their whole lives and livelihoods, whether they'll have a role in that or whether those will be outside concessions that kind of come in and take over and set up huts. And I think the people felt generally concerned and unable to communicate. So we would have knowledge exchanging sessions in the evenings with a translator, and we took a lot of notes, and they asked us just to basically bring these notes, their thoughts, their concerns to the government, to give them to anyone, because nobody was coming up to consult, but they knew that changes were afoot, and so we did deliver those notes, but I don't exactly know how it's going. We might be going back next year. So.
How many countries have you traveled to?
I've probably traveled to about 20 different countries.
And so, are you an independent filmmaker, or do you work for National Geographic specifically?
Pretty much all photographers and filmmakers that work with National Geographic are independent. And I actually don't do my husband, Renan Ozturk, he's a photographer that works with them quite often. But we're both independent. Yeah.
And so along this journey of learning about people and their stories, what is it that, kind of breaks your heart maybe that you've learned there's really nothing you can do about, but you see what's happening to people and you want to help them in some way? What's the best way to help?
I mean, politics breaks my heart right now, but I don't have a very solid background in that arena. But with science and media, I think what's happening is that, there are people in positions of power, and then there are people without those powers. And when it comes to science, those who can go in and assess, okay, this is what's happening to your environment, and we know so because we did the studies and, we assessed what was going on maybe with your fishing or an upcoming mine. The power is very one-sided, and those who control the science can often control what happens to a place. And the same with media. I think that there's a lot of really strong ethical guidelines in media, but in the way that social media has also expanded things, I think we're living in an era where we don't really know what to trust, and we're quite disconnected from the real voices, the real people on the ground in a lot of situations who need to be heard in the mainstream media, who need to be heard in political arenas, and whose voices are often completely left out. And that breaks my heart. I really would love to see more platforms and more co-creations of narratives that don't just come from outside Westerners with certain powers, like myself, and so I'm working on that, actually.
How do you think you can make that happen, though? How can you bring that ordinary voice that has a story to tell and make it really widely known? And I know that's your job, that's what you're looking to do.
Yeah.
But how does it happen?
Well, so I'm involved right now in a film project that is covering the activism rising up within Native American communities and their food systems. And it's a film, all of the executive producers on the film are Native. A lot of the film crew themselves are not Native, myself included. And we went to the tribes and said, how can we make this a more participatory process? How can we co-create this together so that we avoid those pitfalls of, running with certain perspectives or ideas and not really representing things in ways that most help your community when this story is going to be told. And so we got a grant and with the tribes, and they wanted basically to have native photographers, native journalists tell all of the ancillary stories about food sovereignty as the film was being made, so that multiple different, because all tribes too don't obviously think the same thing. They're complete sovereign nations, as diverse as other countries, and so getting to hear all those different voices and their perspectives on the food movements afoot in congruence with this film has helped bring more inclusivity. And we've also been running photo workshops for youth in all of the communities that we go to. So we put out a call on Instagram and got 50 DSLR cameras. And so in every community, we just put together a media library, and it's gifted along with the workshops. The workshops are led by Native American storytellers, not by outsiders. And all of the equipment is left in the community, and there's no oversight or strings attached. And I think that is a way to start to provide more capacity so that we can actually hear from the people directly and not just through our filters.
Exactly. Are you familiar with the Wind River Reservation?
I am, yeah.
Have you done any work there?
No, not on the Wind River Reservation, no.
That would be a great thing to do.
Yeah, I've been talking a little bit to Lisa with the Jackson Hole Wildlife Film Festival. I know they've some projects started, but yeah, it would be an honor.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you for talking to me.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for the talk.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of What's Your Why, a production of Think Why, Wyoming Humanities. This has been executive producer Emmy DeGrappa. Please subscribe and never miss a show. For more information, go to thinkwhy.org.